All right, Mr. Terraney.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant's called Gary Walsh.
Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, please state your name and business address for the record.
Yes, Gary Walsh, 1828 Bull Street, Columbia, South Carolina.
Now, I know this is your first time testifying, so I don't want you to be nervous or anything. Mr. Walsh, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 12 pages of pre-filed rebuttal testimony filed in this docket?
Yes,
Do you have any additions or corrections you wish to make to that testimony?
I do not.
Let's make sure it's on, but it doesn't. It's okay.
Better.
All right, we got you.
Okay, good.
Ms. Wheat's getting you adjusted. Try it now. Test that thing.
Testing. Whoa!
Oh,
Okay.
I'm going to move
All
it back
right.
where it
There's a
was,
happy
Mr.
medium
Chairman.
here that we got to get to. All right.
wow.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, if I were to ask you the questions in your rebuttal testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Gary Walsh be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Walsh's pre-file rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Mr. Walsh, have you prepared or caused to be prepared 5 exhibits included in your rebuttal testimony?
I have.
Do you have any changes or corrections you wish to make to those exhibits?
I have one typo to correct on GW1, which is page 4 of 12 of my testimony.
Is that it?
Yes, the line operating expense in the After Tax Cuts and Jobs Act should read $1,183,131.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Chairman, I move that the exhibits to Mr. Walsh's rebuttal testimony be moved into evidence at this time.
Mr. Walsh's 5 exhibits with the correction will be entered as exhibit number 13.
Mr. Walsh, could you give I'd like you to give a summary of your rebuttal testimony for the commission. Could you start by introducing yourself and your background?
Yes, my name is Gary Walsh. I'm employed as president of Walsh Consulting Group, a position that I've held since November of 2003. Before starting the Walsh Consulting Group, I was employed by the Public Service Commission. I worked at the commission from July of 1972 until November of 2003. I served the commission as an auditor, assistant director of the Utilities Division, deputy executive director, and executive director. I have testified before the commission on many occasions.
What's the purpose of your testimony today?
The purpose of my rebuttal testimony is respond to testimony sponsored by ORS, specifically the testimony filed by witness Seaman Wynn.
Could you provide the commission a summary of your testimony regarding the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act adjustment proposed by the ORS?
Yes. The first issue I address is the appropriateness of ORS's proposal that CUC be required to provide refunds to their customers as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In my testimony, I've explained why the Commission should not require refunds to the CUC customers. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed effective January 1, 2018, and had the effect of lowering the federal tax rate paid by CUC to 21%. CUC filed its application utilizing a 12-month test year beginning January 1, 2018, and ending December 31, 2018. The CUC application was filed incorporating the lower federal tax rate prescribed in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the application demonstrates that during the test year, the company's revenue streams produced an operating margin substantially less than the 12.51% operating margin approved by the Commission in Order Number 2014-1001 dated December 2nd, 2014. As can be seen in our application, the operating revenue in the test year produced an operating margin of 4.03% after accounting and pro forma adjustments. Even if you accept every adjustment proposed by ORS, an operating margin of 5.95% after accounting and pro forma adjustments is reflected in the audit exhibit KLM1, again substantially less than the 12.51 operating margin proposed by ORS. Both CUC and ORS agree that the company is under earning. So ORS's argument that CUC should refund excess revenues does not seem to be a reasonable recommendation, since there are no excess revenues. CUC, in its application, has fully reflected the tax savings from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to the benefit of its customers. The second issue I address is witness Seaman Nguyen's calculation of the refund due CUC customers as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In his testimony, witness Seaman Nguyen has calculated a refund amount due CUC customers of $78,110, which he claims is excess revenue for the 2-year period January 1, 2018 through January 1, 2020. Witness Seaman Nguyen has based his calculation on a 12-month test year ending December 31, 2014, a full 4 years before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was even passed. Instead, I have proposed that should the Commission find a refund is due CUC customers, that the tax cut, it should be based on the current test year, which begins January 1, 2018, the effective date of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. ORS audited the financial statements contained in this application and could have calculated the refunds from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act based on the current audited test year. I have proposed in my testimony that based on the identical methodology used by ORS and accepting all ORS accounting and pro forma adjustments, that the 2-year refund amount due CUC customers is $33,508. My calculations are shown in Exhibit GW1 to my testimony. The approach I have recommended is consistent with a stipulated memorandum of understanding between Kiowa Utilities and ORS approved by the Commission in docket number 2018-257-WS. The next issue I address in my testimony is inclusion of the amortization of excess revenues in determining net operating income. As I previously stated, witness Seaman Nguyen calculated a total 2-year refund amount due CUC customers of $78,110. Witness Seaman Nguyen then amortizes the total refund over 3 years to calculate an amortization of excess revenue amount of $26,307. Witness Seaman Nguyen then proposes to include the $26,307 as other operating income in arriving at net income from margin, as can be seen in Audit Exhibit KLM1, Adjustment 17. Clearly, the inclusion of revenues that will be refunded to customers in prospective net operating income does not establish sound regulatory policy. In this proceeding, the commission will be setting rates prospectively, and to base that decision on artificially inflated revenues would make it virtually impossible for the utility to achieve its authorized operating margin. The last issue I address in my testimony concerns witness Seaman Wynn's recommendation that the commission set the operating margin in this proceeding at 12.51%. Witness Seaman Wynn in his testimony fails to include any of the commission's orders issued in 2019 in arriving at his analysis. The commission's most recent orders in water and sewer cases would seem to be the most useful as a point of comparison with this case. For instance, the commission approved a 14.25% operating margin for Kiowa Island Utilities in order number 2019-288 and a 14.56% operating margin for Palmetto Wastewater Reclamation in order number 2019-314. My exhibit GW3 includes operating margins from 2014 through 2019, excluding two cases that are outliers because they requested increases that resulted in low increases to begin with, Synergy and TJ Barnwell. It shows the average operating margin for this period was 14.52%, and the three-year average was 14.30%, as shown in Exhibit GW3. If one excludes rate of return cases, which Mr. Seaman Wynn did not, the average operating margin from 2014 to 2019 was 14.95%, and from 2016 through 2019 was 14.40%, as shown in my exhibit GW4. The 12.51 margin recommended by ORS is clearly out of line with the Commission's recent orders. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Please answer any questions the parties or the commissioners may have.
Thank you. Mr. Pringle.
I have no questions for Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Mr. Bateman. Okay, thank you. No questions from ORS. Commissioners. Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walsh,
Yes, Commissioner.
if I could get you to, are you familiar with the rebuttal testimony of Mr. Seaman Wynn?
Yes.
On page 3 of this testimony, he used a distinction between excess revenue and excess earnings. Can you explain to me the differential between these two as it refers to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, please?
Yes, Commissioner. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act affects regulated utilities in a much different way than it does any other corporation. If I'm selling widgets and I no longer pay the 34% tax rate, I have the ability to actually cut the price of my widgets. As a regulated water and sewer utility, which CUC is, this commission determines what excess revenues are. And as I have demonstrated in our application, during the test year, which again is the full 12 months that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was in effect, we were severely under-earning. Even at ORS's numbers, it was a 5.95% operating margin. So there are no excess revenues. We are not earning, where revenues are not creating earnings that in fact equal to what this commission has authorized this company to earn.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Walsh.
Morning, Ms. Belzer.
It's a bit strange.
It's very strange. It's good to see you on the bench.
I want to talk with you a bit about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as well.
Certainly.
Are you familiar with the order that the commission issued, I believe in April of 2018, that directed utilities to create a regulatory liability.
I am familiar.
And Mrs. Michael indicated that they did not do that. They had tried to work with ORS and weren't clear on what to do, basically. That's my paraphrase, and,
Correct.
you know. When rates were set in the last rate case, and I believe that was a December 2014 order, the utility would you agree that the utility would have been allowed expenses based on the then current tax rate that was in effect at that time? And that was either 34 or 35%.
34%, yes, ma'am.
And so that was built into the rates, the ability to collect sufficient money to pay the taxes that would be incurred by the utility.
I would agree.
Okay. Based on the expenses at that time.
Correct.
Okay. Therefore, when the tax rates changed, is it now the position of the utility that they should not have to lower or refund money that was collected to be able to pay those taxes?
That would certainly be our position, and again, that's based on the fact that there are no excess
I didn't say excess earnings, and I didn't say excess revenues, but they were, and I don't know the booking, I don't know the proper accounting that goes into accounting for those, for taxes, but the intent is generally to allow the utility to be able to pay the taxes that they're gonna, that's factored into the rates, is that correct?
That's correct. And in their last rate case, which again was the December 2014 test year, the actual rates were calculated at the tax rate that was in effect at the time.
And it was, and those, what was calculated in that order would have been the income and projected income and expenses known at that time.
That's correct.
Okay. So here we are, a few years later, the rate changes, it's lowered, which is unusual, and the company has in its rates, money to collect a certain amount of taxes, which is higher than the new rate is set in 2018.
The current rates reflect the higher tax rate, correct?
So let's say the commission disagrees with that no taxes should be refunded. Let's talk about the proper amount that would need to be refunded.
Correct.
Okay, so I think I want to talk through your exhibit that you just updated with the correction. I think that's on page 4 of your direct testimony. And I want you to walk me through how you get to your 2-year refund amount, if you would.
What I have done in this exhibit, Commissioner.
Oh, do you want to put it on the Elmo, Mr. Trini? Is that what you were standing for? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Do you have a copy?
That is it, Mr. Terrini.
Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Belser, if you refer to KLM1, Mr. Major's exhibit, KLM1, again, CUC has accepted all operating, all pro forma adjustments that have been made by ORS other than adjustment number 17. So what I have done in this exhibit, I have used the identical methodology that Mr. Seaman Wynn used in calculating his $78,000, other than I have based it on the actual test year when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was in effect. So we don't have to speculate what it was prior to January 1 of 2018, we know the effect as of January 1 of 2018 because we have a fully audited test year here that demonstrates that. So I have taken the operating revenues of 1.2 million, 1,284,946, as reflected in Mr. Major's exhibit. I have subtracted operating expenses of 1,183,131, which gives me a taxable income of 101,815. I have applied the 5% state tax rate, which gives you state income taxes of 5,091. And in this exhibit, I have calculated the federal tax rate at the 34% in column 1, as well as at 21% in column 2, coming up with a net income in column 1 of 63,838, and with the lower federal tax rate of 76,412 after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We add back our interest expense, and we come up with a net income for return prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of $66,025, and after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of $78,599, for a cumulative change of $12,574 on an annual basis. You then blow that factor up for the retention factor, and the retention factor is basically 1 minus the effective tax rate. So that's how you get to that 75.05. You blow that 12, or gross that 12,574 up for the retention factor, and you come up with an annual cumulative change of 16,754. Since we anticipate this order to be issued on or about January 1 of 2020, I then multiply that times 2 to give you a 2-year effect.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I appreciate that explanation.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Walsh.
Afternoon, Commissioner Whitfield.
Mr. Walsh, on page 8 of your rebuttal testimony, I'll give you a second to get there.
Yes, sir, I'm there.
You talk about orders you removed from your operating margin analysis.
Correct.
I guess specifically order 2018-369 Synergy and order 2016-49 TJ Barnwell, and you go on to say that you remove these from your operating margin analysis because you cite these orders as abnormally low.
Correct.
In that context, why did you not remove any orders because the operating margin was abnormally high?
Well, Commissioner Whitfield, in removing these two outliers, if you review both of these orders and both of those applications, in an effort to mitigate the percentage increase, both of these utilities sought operating margins that were very low. And again, rather than trying to, for instance, achieve a 13% operating margin, in lieu of that, both of those utilities in both of those cases asked for operating margins that were very low because of the actual percentage increase that would have taken to get to what I would call a reasonable operating margin.
What were your parameters in making this analysis?
I basically took, Commissioner Whitfield, and calculated a simple average of Commission's decisions for a 5-year period through 2019 and a 3-year period through 2019, exactly as Mr. Seaman Wynn did. However, he failed to include any of the Commission's most recent decisions. And certainly as this Commission reviews rate of return on equity cases, the most current conditions are the conditions that are generally it's measured against. So this should be no different.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, appreciate your testimony,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
you
Chairman.
may step down. Okay, Mr. Terraini?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the applicant's case. I will make a statement to the commission as we conclude this case that while we have stated our position on Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, should the commission adopt the method just demonstrated by Mr. Walsh, the company would not appeal. It would make that refund.
Thank you. Okay, it's about 12:20, so why don't we, before we continue, and I think next we'll have Mr. Parkinson and Mr. Pringle, but we'll break for lunch first, and why don't we come back at 1:30, and we are adjourned till then. Okay, welcome back. I believe we are, ball's in your court, Mr. Pringle.
All right, the interveners present Patrick Parkinson. Sweet will swear you in.
Parkinson, if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Parkinson, if you would, please state your full name and address for the commission and the record.
Patrick W. Parkinson, 22 Sugar Mill Drive, Kalawasi Island, South Carolina.
Are you presently employed?
No, I'm retired.
Okay. Can you provide just briefly a little bit about your educational and professional background?
Sure. I graduated from Newark College of Engineering in June 1968 with a BS degree in electrical engineering. I also received an MS degree from Newark College of Engineering in 1971. Prior to my retirement, I was the executive director of the Township of Middletown Sewerage Authority in Middletown, New Jersey for 15 years. The Middletown Sewerage Authority has approximately 25,000 customers servicing almost 100,000 residents. At the end of my tenure as executive director, the authority had a budget of $8 million annually and a $1 million capital budget.
Okay. That'll suffice for right now.
Okay.
Now, have you prepared direct testimony in this docket consisting of 9 pages in question and answer format?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any additions, deletions, or changes to make to that testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you all the questions that appear in that testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that Mr. Parkinson's direct testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Parkinson's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Mr. Parkinson, did you also prepare an exhibit in connection with your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that the levels be adjusted. No, that Mr. Parkinson's exhibit be marked for identification and entered into evidence as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Parkinson's exhibit will be entered in his exhibit number 14.
Okay. Mr. Parkinson, did you also prepare surrebuttal testimony consisting of 6 pages in question and answer format?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any additions, deletions, or changes to make to that testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you all the questions that appear in that testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that Mr. Parkinson's surrebuttal testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Parkinson's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Parkinson, have you prepared a summary of your testimony, both your direct and your surrebuttal?
Yes, I have.
Okay, could you present that to the commission, please?
Sure. As I was briefly alluding to, my background was as executive director of the Middletown Sewerage Authority in New Jersey. I was also served as a board member of the New Jersey Association of Environmental Authorities from 2001 through 2006. I served as a board member of the New Jersey Utilities Authority Joint Insurance Fund from 1999 through 2012 and as chairman of that organization from 2006 through 2008. The application that's before you, first of all, I do want to take the opportunity to thank you all for coming to Kalawasi. We had a nice turnout from the residents, and they were very appreciative of the fact that you came. The application before you today has several key elements I'd like to talk about. The first is the application has misrepresented a summary of the revenue. The application states, quote, CUC has experienced a marked decrease in revenues, end of quote. This is not accurate. As shown in Exhibit D of the company's application, revenue has increased from $1,135,448 in 2015 to $1,277,065 in 2018, which is a $141,617 increase, or 12.5%. The other points I would like to make regarding this application is in the area of expenses. Expenses have dramatically increased in all areas. The general expenses have increased by over 25%. Employees' salaries have increased by 55%. Benefits, 26%. A recommendation has been made in our testimony to reorganize the company, which would involve closing the Florence, South Carolina office and relocating the necessary functions to the Kalawasi Island office, which, along with implementing an employee health insurance cost-sharing program, would result in annual savings of $328,879. Another recommendation has been made to implement a company website with electronic billing to provide customers the ability to pay their bills when they are at home or traveling. And I will say I'm very pleased to hear today that those recommendations that we made are now going to be implemented. We also did a survey of other wastewater and water and wastewater rates being charged in the area, and we submitted that, and CUCs are pretty much the highest in the state of South Carolina. And to give you a comparison, in New Jersey, where I was executive director, currently the rate is $80 a quarter. If I was using the CUC rates, I would be paying $120. And generally, New Jersey is known at a higher cost of living state. In addition, the cost of water is quite troubling to us. CUC pays Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewerage Authority $2.70 per 1,000 gallons purchased, and currently charges our residents $5.50 per 1,000, and proposes to increase this to $6.63, which would be 2.46 times what they're paying. Finally, our testimony requests a 16% rate reduction based on the recommendations we present. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Parkinson is available for questions from the other parties and from the commissioners.
Thank you. Mr. Terraney.
We need to do something to project.
What are you trying to?
Just have my laptop up. No? Still not. Are y'all able to see it?
Mr. Erskine's coming forward.
Please, Mr. Erskine. No, that's. It worked before. Okay, I'm sorry about that. You all hear me okay? Good afternoon, Ms. Parkinson. Ms. Parkinson, would you agree that health insurance is one of several elements of a compensation package?
Yes, I would.
That salary might be part of it,
Yes.
vacation,
Yes.
sick leave,
Yes.
pension?
Yes.
Okay. And your testimony is informed by the fact that you're the former executive director of the Township of Middletown Sewer Authority, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was in Middletown, New Jersey, I
That's correct.
And you served in that capacity for many years, 1997 to 2012.
Correct.
And your service, well, when you ran Middletown, did you have a collective bargaining agreement
Yes, we did.
with who?
With the local union.
Okay. And the local union, was it the Communications Workers of America?
Yes, I believe that was the name of the union.
Okay. And do you recognize the document I've put up on the screen? You think that might be the first page of your collective bargaining?
Yes, I recognize that document. Yep.
And in that collective bargaining agreement, you spelled out the benefits that would be paid to your workers at your utility.
That's correct.
Right? And that's your signature line on that agreement, right? You were
Well, there's no signature, but that
no,
certainly is
I
my
mean, that
name.
was where the line was.
Yeah.
Okay. And as part of your agreement with the union, your workers enjoyed as much as 21 days of vacation.
That's correct.
They enjoyed a number of paid holidays.
That's correct.
They had sick leave.
That's correct.
And the sick leave was 12 sick days per calendar year.
That's correct.
And when they retired from the authority, they would accrue those sick leaves, and they could actually be paid for up to 120 days of sick
At
leave.
50% of the value.
Okay. They received premiums according to any professional licenses they had, correct?
Yes, it was a stipend.
They had something called personal days, up to three of
That's
them.
that's correct.
And personal days are days that are not like, they're not holidays, but as I understand it, they're just days you can take, but the difference is they don't accrue.
That's correct. You may have a child sick or something that, at the last minute you can't come into work.
And that's in addition to the sick leave,
That's correct.
which you could have taken for family purposes as well.
No, generally sick leave was you had to be sick.
You had to be sick
Yeah.
yourself, okay. You had a uniform allowance, didn't you?
That's correct.
You paid for the dry cleaning of the uniforms.
That's correct.
And retirement benefits included, so your retirement, there were a traditional pension plan, is that right?
Well, there was a significant contribution by the employees to the pension plan.
Correct, but it was a state, it was a, it was a traditional state
State
pension,
administered, correct.
lifetime pension.
Yes, administered by the state, but the employees made significant contributions through each paycheck.
Certainly. And they also had post-retirement health benefits.
Yes, that is correct. After you had to serve so many years, there was a qualifier for that.
And their dependents had of those qualified employees, their dependents also had
That's correct.
post-retirement health benefits.
That's correct.
And finally, they had health insurance.
They contributed to their health insurance.
Well, let's look at this. The authority shall provide at no cost to the employee medical and health insurance coverage under the New Jersey State Health Benefits Plan to cover full family responsibilities, including the spouse of the employee and dependent children of the employee, including students up to age 21. Is that correct?
No, because the state law changed in New Jersey in 2011, requiring employee contributions for all state employees throughout the state.
So your collective bargaining agreement, you're saying, was overridden?
Yes, it was overridden by the state.
But the families still kept the coverage.
You had to contribute.
Okay, but they still
You
kept
could
the
opt
coverage.
out. You could opt out, but you had to contribute.
They kept, dependents had coverage, right?
Yes, but there were contribution levels.
I think that's not,
Yeah,
that wasn't my
they had
question.
coverage, yes.
And dependents up to age 23 had coverage.
I believe that was the case, yes.
And they had a prescription card.
Again, they had to contribute.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Parkinson. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Commissioners?
Thank you. Mr. Bateman? Thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Howard?
Oh, good morning, good afternoon. We enjoyed being at Kalawasi. Again, I said that night, but again, I'll reiterate the professionalism and the dignity that was shown by your people in the presentation. It was very heartwarming, and I appreciate a lot of effort went into it. That I appreciate.
Thank you for that comment.
I'd like to discuss with you your staffing recommendations. I'm on page 5 of your pre-file, I guess it is. And let's discuss the closing of the Florence office. What effect would that have on the operation of Kalawasi not to have that office moved from Florence to Kalawasi?
Well, it would have virtually no effect. Let me explain. The officers rarely visit Kalawasi Island, okay? Probably less than 5 times a year. So there's no day-to-day management being provided by the officers. That's all by the local employees on Kalawasi Island. The billing, the collection, the customer service, done currently by Kalawasi Island. The few tasks that are done up in Florence, like approval of invoices, cutting the payroll, annual surveys, these are minuscule tasks that could be done in less than 8 hours a day. And I say that from my experience. My administrative staff, we had 25,000 customers worked right outside my office, and I watched them process the invoices and handle the phones. And we had a staff of 4 for like 25,000 customers. Here we have about 1,000 customers, and they have the same staff of 4. Now, granted, they're saying they're providing management, but you can't day-to-day manage a sewage or water authority unless you're on site. You got to look around. You've got to look at issues. You got to correct issues. You got to meet with your management, meet with your staff, develop plans, develop strategies. None of that's being done here.
All right, eliminate the officer/employee positions and transfer the responsibility to existing personnel. Annual saving, including benefits, to be $280,000. What are the responsibilities of the office-employee relations? What are their responsibilities?
The office, let me just look at the office.
It's the first bullet there, line 8 on your testimony.
Okay, office employee positions. Well, the savings, which I indicated, would be the savings from closing Florence. There's an existing position in Kalawasi Island that does the customer service work, billing, collection, answering the phones. And all that work by that person, the job would be upgraded, salary would be a little more, and it would handle the additional administrative duties being done up in Florence, such as approving invoices for payment, payroll, things like that. I had a person do that right outside my office. It's a routine job.
Upgrade the operations manager position to general manager at an annual salary increase of $30,000.
Right.
What did the general manager pay now? What is,
I can't reveal that because I signed a confidentiality statement. But, you know, that person would basically expand some of the current duties that the manager has to, you know, handle these additional administrative duties that would be relocated from Florence. I don't know if you're aware, but they wouldn't even let me visit the Florence office.
I heard that, yeah, I heard that. So basically, operation, the general manager would be in charge of the whole deal?
The whole show. And report to the owners, you know, but the owners certainly deserve to make a fair profit.
Oh, yeah. Upgrade the office manager position to Director of Administration and Finance at an annual salary increase of $25,000. Have the Office of Administrative and Finance report to the General Manager.
Correct.
What all would be his responsibility, that position?
That person will be responsible for the bookkeeping, the accounting, and the customer service functions, which include billing collection, which is
That
currently.
is done now in Florence?
That's the
Still on
billing
the
and
island.
collection is done in Kalawasi. The accounting is done in Florence.
Eliminate both office assistant positions. Annual saving include be $75,000. What are the responsibilities of the office assistants?
Don't know. They never told us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Irvin.
I'd like to also echo Commissioner's remarks that we enjoyed being with you.
Thank you.
You were very professional in every respect, well prepared, and we appreciate the opportunity to come and be on site to learn more about your situation. One of the things that struck me was that perhaps some of these administrative duties could be contracted out. I know that a lot of small corporations do outsource payroll, for example. Banks like Wells Fargo have a payroll system where, you know, you can actually enter it by computer, and they'll actually print the checks and FedEx them to your location where the employees are. Same's true with administrative work. You can hire that out at a very reasonable competitive cost in the local community. Are these some of the things that you'd like to see the company consider?
That is a very clear option. In fact, we do that on Kalawasi Island. With our property association, the owners association, we contract out to a company which is located right outside of our gate. They handle a bunch of gated communities. They do our payroll, human resources, all the accounting, and they do all those they pay the invoices and everything. So that is certainly something that could be done. In fact, I would strongly suggest that a bid be obtained to see what that would cost, because the cost right now of the Florence office, when you add everything up and you put in 401ks, health insurance, Social Security taxes, all that, you're between $350,000, $400,000 a year on an expense budget of $1.2 million. We want them to be successful, and we want the owners to make a profit, but we also want reasonable rates.
And so, would you be willing to provide that contact that you have locally that handles your payroll and other services?
Without a doubt,
And
sure.
To the company?
Without a doubt.
And perhaps there's someone in the community like you that has prior management experience who would enjoy a part-time or full-time position. You know, thought occurred to me. You're well qualified. Would you
Well,
like to offer your services to the company?
I spent many years, in addition to being a full-time worker, I was, as I mentioned to the chairman, I was mayor in our township committee and a few other posts. So it's nice being very active with the POA, but I think those days are behind me.
I understand.
But I'd certainly be willing to offer free advice.
Sure. Do you think perhaps a committee from your property owners association, do you well, let me ask you this way. Do you currently have a committee that meets regularly, monthly or quarterly, to assess these kind of issues, and would a stakeholder-type committee be of some value to the company? Is that something that you all would be willing
Oh,
to do?
We have a Property Owners Association Board of Directors, of which I'm a member. I was president of it for 3 years. We meet monthly, plus we have committee meetings. We've actually invited CUC to be on our Emergency Management and Planning Committee, which they're a member. And, we would certainly welcome more contact with CUC. Whenever they've asked us for a meeting, we've been very hospitable and set it up. So I think the way to success is for us to be partners with them.
That's right. Sometimes communication can break down barriers, and it might, work to both sides' advantage to have that opportunity, once or twice a year to assess where you are. And if there's something like what we heard about at the night hearing, where a fire hydrant's removed and hadn't been replaced for months on end, that's a safety issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm sure it was called to their attention, but for whatever reason, you didn't get a satisfactory response. And there are other examples that came up.
But in defense of CUC, I do want to say it was operable. So I don't want to create the impression it wasn't operable.
Thank you for that. But in any event, that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about, is just to break down those barriers. And I would encourage the company to do that. And
Heck, what we do from time to time is have these town hall meetings, kind of like the other night. We had our congressman in, and we had our state representative in, and they put on a little bit of an explanation and then a lot of questions, and it really does create a good working relationship.
That's right. But I appreciate your testimony, and I think that certainly cost savings is what we all hope to accomplish. The company certainly has a right to a reasonable return. We will all acknowledge that, but where their cost savings can be had at little effort, I think these issues need to be looked at, and we're going to look carefully at the record to see, how we should address that. Thank you for your attendance today.
Thank you. Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Parkinson.
Afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation today. I just want to, I'd like to look at your Exhibit 1 so that I can make sure that I am reading the comparisons correctly, if you would.
Would you like me to explain it?
If you would, can you tell me, first of all, tell me about the comparison entities?
Well, the entities, many of them are located in our geographical area. The only one that's not really is we used Florence there, because that's where the company's headquartered. But most of them are gated communities, with the exception of Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewerage Authority, and they service, most of the county, Jasper and Beaufort counties.
Are any of these investor-owned utilities, or are they all municipal, public service?
Moss Creek is. That's called Water Oak Company.
That's an investor-owned?
Yes.
Not familiar with that name. And we don't have that many investor-owned, so. Now, tell me, we heard testimony earlier that CUC bills bi-monthly.
Right.
These monthly rates for the other entities, are these, is that a monthly rate or a bi-monthly rate?
This is a monthly comparison. I put everything on a monthly level.
Okay, and the CUC 2018, that's a monthly rate as well?
Yes, that's $150 a month on average that a typical customer with an irrigation system would pay.
Okay.
Some of the testimony provided to you shows just a water and sewer customer, but I don't know if you're aware, but we use as much irrigation water from them as we do regular water. So, my personal case is an example. Last year I used 35,000 gallons of regular water and 114,000 of irrigation water. So there's, it's about 2/3 of the customers, I believe, have irrigation systems.
Okay. But that 150, that is household water, wastewater service, and irrigation
For
service.
typical customers.
Typical.
That's correct.
Of what amount? Did you use a certain gallons?
Yeah, I used about 10,000. It's about 10,000 gallons a month.
Okay, and you explained that in your testimony?
Yeah.
And that was higher than what CUC indicated?
Right, because they didn't use irrigation.
Okay. Is that, I reckon there's several commercial, not many, but a few commercial customers.
Not many at all.
That doesn't skew
No,
that.
they're not as significant. In fact, to back up our numbers, what I did, I went to Buford Jasper, and I asked them to give me the amounts they supplied every year, and it was like 81 million gallons, and they have 800, from their testimony, there's 810 customers that get water and sewer, and it's just about on target for an average of about, 10,000 gallons per family with irrigation systems. Some are higher, some are lower.
Now, I know that, of course, expenses are at issue here. But looking at the rate design used, it looks like that expenses are split between the base charge and the commodity charge. Do y'all disagree with that? And the reason I ask that is if everything is front-loaded on the base charge, there's really no way for savings, but if you kind of if you have a split with some in the commodity charge, then people that use less, say,
Right.
2 household,
Way less.
it would be less. Do y'all object to that kind of?
No, I
rate
think the base
design?
charge should be lower. In fact, we can't even go out and have a water conservation program because if we conserve water, the rates will go up. It makes no sense when you
Well,
think about it.
where I'm coming from is the testimony that how much more for what you're being charged per thousand that the company is paying Buford Jasper.
Well, the other interesting thing is, if you look at it, they've split half their expenses against water and half against sewer. And even the ORS picked up on this. That's not necessarily the way to do it because the water requires hardly any labor. Comes over to causeway and it goes through pipes that are in the ground. Perhaps a little bit of testing, and if you have a leak once in a while to fix that. But the sewage operation requires more labor. You're operating 2 plants.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Any redirect, Mr. Pringle?
I don't have any redirect, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Parkinson, thank you for being here and appreciate your testimony, and you may step down. Okay, Mr. Bateman.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, ORS calls its 3 witnesses to the stand, Mr. Seaman Wynn, Mr. Major, and Ms. James. Charlie, may I close this? Mr. Chairman, while our 3 witnesses are taking the stand, we want to thank the Commission for allowing us to present them via a panel format.
You all would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Finally, Mr. Chairman, I will be presenting the testimony of Mr. Major and Mr. Seaman Wynn, and Ms. Hammonds will be presenting the testimony of Ms. James. Mr. Major, would you please state your name and occupation?
My name is Kelvin Major, and I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as an audit manager.
And are you the same Kelvin Major who pre-filed 11 pages of direct testimony in this case on November 5th, 2019?
Yes, I am.
If I ask you the same questions today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that Mr. Major's direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Major's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Mr. Major, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 8 exhibits labeled KLM 1 through KLM 8, which were filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your exhibits?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, ORS asks that Mr. Major's exhibits KLM 1 through KLM 8 be marked for identification and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Majors, exhibits KLM 1 through 8 will be entered as composite exhibit number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Major, did you also prepare a summary of your pretrial direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please share your summary with the commission?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My testimony sets forth the findings and recommendations resulting from ORS's examination of the application of CUC. ORS's examination consisted of verifying the operating experience, operating margin, and rate base per the company's application per book amounts, testing the underlying transactions to ensure they were properly supported, had a stated business purpose, and were allowable for rate-making purposes. Lastly, the examination consisted of making adjustments as necessary to revenues, expenditures, and rate base to normalize the test year. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hammonds will present the testimony of Ms. James.
Ms. James, will you please state your name, full name, and occupation?
My name is Jaquila James. I am employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as an auditor.
And are you the same Jaquila James who pre-filed 6 pages of direct testimony in this case on November 5th, 2019?
Yes,
Do you have any changes or corrections to your testimony?
I do not.
And if I asked you the questions contained in your pre-filed testimony today, would your answers still be the same?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. James be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. James' pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Ms. James, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
yes, I did.
And will you please present that for the commission now?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My testimony sets forth ORS's findings and recommendations for certain adjustments resulting from ORS's examination of the application of CUC Inc. in docket number 2019-64-WS. Specifically, I address ORS's findings and recommendations for adjustments 3E, maintenance expense, 3G, transportation expense, 3H, insurance expense, 3J, sludge removal, 4, depreciation and amortization, 6A, property taxes, 9, gross plant and service, 10, accumulated depreciation, 11, contribution and aid construction, and 12, amortization of CIAC. These findings and recommendations are explained in detail in my testimony. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Ms. James.
And Mr. Seaman Nguyen, would you please state your name and occupation?
My name is Michael Seaman Nguyen. I am the Deputy Director of Energy Operations for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
And are you the same Michael Seaman Nguyen who pre-filed 12 pages of direct testimony in this case on November 5th, 2019?
Yes, I am.
And did you subsequently file revised direct testimony on November 6th, 2019?
Yes.
What were the revisions made?
The revisions made were the replacement of 2 numbers on page 8 of my direct testimony on lines 4 and 6.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed revised direct testimony?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, ORS asks that Mr. Seaman Nguyen's revised direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Nguyen's pre-filed revised direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Nguyen, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 6 exhibits labeled MSH1 through MSH6, which were filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that Mr. Seaman Nguyen's exhibits MSH1 through MSH6 be marked for identification and entered into the record of the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Seaman Nguyen's 6 exhibits, MSH 1 through 6, will be entered as composite exhibit number 16.
Thank you. And are you the same Michael Seaman Wynn who pre-filed 9 pages of rebuttal testimony in this case on November 22nd, 2019?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that Mr. Seaman Wynn's rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And if it pleases the commission, we have a question and answer format for Mr. Seaman Wynn's summary.
Fine.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, would you please summarize the areas that ORS examined in this case?
Absolutely. Let me first say good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My testimony addresses certain areas of ORS's examination of CUC's application. Specifically, I address CUC's compliance with Commission rules and regulations, ORS adjustments to test year revenues, ORS proposed rates, revenues, and resulting operating margin, ORS customer growth calculation, ORS recommendations related to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and ORS recommendations regarding a rate for availability fees.
And what are your conclusions regarding CUC's compliance with Commission rules and regulations?
ORS found that CUC is in compliance with all Commission requirements except that CUC charges an availability fee to applicable water and sewer customers, which has not been approved by the Commission.
And what is ORS's recommended operating margin for CUC?
ORS recommends an operating margin of 12.51% based on CUC's current operations, excellent customer service, and current financial condition. The financial condition of the company during the test year indicates an operating margin of 12.51% is sufficient to recover reasonable incurred expenses and maintain efficient, high-quality, reliable business operations and utility service.
And what is the resulting revenue increase recommended by ORS?
Based on ORS's adjustments as addressed by ORS witnesses Major and James and a 12.51% operating margin, ORS recommends the Commission approve a revenue increase to CUC of $53,990 for water operations and $40,320 for sewer operations.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, I may have misheard you. What is the recommended dollar figure increase for water operations?
$53,930.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn, please describe the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act adjustment proposed by ORS.
In compliance with Commission Order 2008-308, ORS calculated the deferred effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. ORS recommends a total return to customers of $78,110 for excess revenue collections over a 3-year amortization period.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman Wynn. And that order referenced was an order that has been referenced a couple times already. That was Commission Order number 2018-308. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, do you have any additional recommendations to the Commission regarding the company's availability fees?
Yes. CUC does not currently have a water and sewer availability fee approved by the Commission. During the test year, CUC received approximately $38,892 in revenue associated with water and sewer availability fees and late fees on availability fees. ORS recommends the company establish a specific rate and tariff language for water and sewer availability fees. These rates should be approved by the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman Wynn. Does this conclude your summary?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Major, Ms. James, and Mr. Seaman Wynn are available for questions from other parties and the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Terani.
Indulge me for just a second. All right, Mr. Major. You're an audit manager with the ORS, is that right?
Let's get your microphone on there, Mr. Major.
Yes, sir.
And you supervised the ORS's review of CUC's application.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Exhibit KLM1 provides a summary of that review, is that right?
Yes, it does.
And column 1 shows the test year as set out in the company's application, is that right?
Yes, sir. The per books amounts. Yes, sir.
Column 2 would show the adjustments recommended by the ORS as a result of the review, correct?
Yes.
Column 3 shows the status of the test year after the ORS's adjustments, right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Now, the item income taxes under operating expenses reflects the company's income tax liability for 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And that's the circled number. I can't read it from here, but I think it's 25,403. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a combination of state and federal income taxes. Is that right?
That's right.
The federal income tax rate was 21%, and the state income tax rate was 5%, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, and that 21% federal income tax rate took effect on January 1st, 2018. Is that right?
Yes, sir. According to the Tax and Cuts
Yeah.
and Jobs Act, yes, sir.
Right. Now, taxable income is calculated by taking operating income and subtracting operating expenses, right?
That is correct.
And the operating expenses you subtract would be composed of a total of depreciation expenses, rate case expenses, taxes other than income, and interest expense. Is that right?
That's right. Under your operating expenses section.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the interest, I think, is down below, but you add that in as well, right?
Yes, sir. Okay.
And in this case, that means that your net taxable income would have been $1,284,946, and those total operating expenses would have been $1,183,131, and resulting in a taxable income of $101,815. Is that right?
I don't see those numbers, sir.
They're not on your schedule,
Okay.
but what I did was I took the 1,284,946, that's on the schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and then I added, and these items are on the schedule, depreciation, rate case expenses, taxes other than income, and interest expense, and that gives me $1,183,131. Does that sound right at least? I mean, I'm not trying to get you to do math, and I promise you, if I have a trick question, I'll tell you before I ask it.
Okay. Subject to check.
Okay, subject to check. And so my point is that's how you calculate operating expenses, right?
Sir, in this case,
I mean net income.
in this case, we incorporated the amortization of excess revenues into total revenues before calculating the operating income.
that amortization, are you talking about the 25,000? Because I'm not asking about that. I'm talking about how you calculated your 25,404.03 tax liability. That was your calculation, wasn't it, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That didn't involve adding 26,000 to revenues. That was done according to this formula we just talked about, right?
Yes, sir, in column 3.
Okay.
Okay.
And so, as we said, we have a combined income tax liability of 25,403. You agree with that? I mean, that's your number.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. And if the federal tax liability had been 34% instead of 21%, that taxable liability would have been higher, right? The taxable expense would have been higher.
Yes, it would have.
Okay. And at the bottom of your column 3, you found that an effective operating margin for the company during the test year, as adjusted, was 5.95%. Is that correct?
That's correct, after accounting and pro forma adjustments.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Major. Mr. Seaman Wynn.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to talk about your exhibit MSH4. This is the exhibit that illustrates your calculation of the company's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act liability. Is that right?
I can't read a single thing on the screen, but I'm going to take your word for it.
Do you want a paper copy
I
of
have a
it,
copy
or
in front
you
of
got
me.
one in
Yeah,
front of
it's
you?
the same document.
It's the same, I promise. We've known each other for a long time, Mr. Seaman Wynn. And you used the same method, not same numbers, but the same method to compute taxable income as Mr. Major just explained to the commission, correct?
That is correct.
But I mean, operating revenues minus operating expenses, which in your case included taxes other than income and interest expense.
Yes, sir.
And when you did that, you arrived at $238,296 in taxable income.
Yes, sir.
And that's more than twice the taxable income Mr. Major used to compute the company's tax liability in his exhibit KLM1, isn't it?
Mr. Major's, Witness Major's calculations were based off of test year expenses and revenues. My calculations are based off of the last commission-approved numbers.
We're going to get there, I promise. But that is twice Mr. Major's number, isn't it? I mean, he came up with operating expenses of of net taxable income of $101,815. That was the basis of his income tax liability calculation, was it not?
Subject to check, I believe that's what
All
you
right.
said.
And your taxable income was $238,296. It's on your exhibit, right?
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
And that is more than twice mathematically. It's just a math thing.
Mathematically speaking, yes, sir.
That's twice what he came up with
sir.
for his 2018 column 3. Right. And that is due to the fact, and I think you just alluded to it, is that when you calculated the income tax liability, you relied on the taxable income reflected in Order 2014-1001 in the company's last rate case. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that case was based on a 2013 test year. Is that not right?
Yes, that is correct.
So when you applied the tax cut, which took effect in January 1st of 2018, you applied it to the company's 2014 rate increase numbers. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. And the reasoning for that.
I didn't ask the reasoning. Is that why?
Yes.
Okay. And that would mean that you used column 5 on that schedule from 2013 to compute the income tax liability instead of column 3 on Exhibit KLM1. Is that correct?
Again, I can't read a single thing that you have up there.
Well, feel free to get up and take a look, because, I mean, this is important. We can go together. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the exhibit attached with the settlement agreement to the 2014 order?
Well, no, it's actually 2 exhibits. It's
I'm talking about the one on the left.
the one on the left is the 2013 order settlement agreement.
You can give him this copy to look at.
Thank you.
That's the order.
You have a copy of KLM1?
I do, yes.
Okay, so you can look at them together. And it's a simple point I'm trying to make, Mr. Seaman Wynn. All I'm saying is when you calculated the income tax liability or the refund, you used the Commission's approved revenues in 2014, which would be the 5th column on the settlement agreement exhibit that Commissioner Belser just helped us provide.
That is correct.
That's where you got your numbers.
Yes.
Instead of column 3, which includes Mr. Major's calculation of the company's actual income tax liability for 2018. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And that led you to a calculation of $39,214 of an annual revenue impact, which you propose to refund to the customers over 2 years. Right? I mean, you would multiply 39,000 by 2, coming up with your total refund amount of 78,000 and change. Is that right?
That's correct. I believe that we're recommending to refund that to customers over 3 years, not 2 years.
Well, you are recommending that you do something with that money over 3 years, and we'll get to that in a minute. But my understanding, and I'll let Mr. Bateman correct it if I'm wrong, is that you were planning a refund over 2 years of $39,000 a year. But if it's still $78,000, right? I mean, we agree with that. Whether you do it over 3, whether you do it over 2, it's a total refund of $78,000.
Yes.
Okay. And $78,000 reflects twice the annual savings, as you call them, excess revenues.
Could you repeat the question?
Well, if you have excess revenues, as you call them, of $39,214 a year, and your total refund is $78,110, it reflects a biannual calculation, not an annual calculation. In other words, you want to refund 2 years of savings.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I'm getting at. Now, if you divide $78,110 by 3, you get $26,037, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that number on your exhibit KLM1, and I know it's hard to see, and it's hard to see for me, but you did add that number to operating income in this column 4 as part of your adjustment 17 and in column 5, correct?
Those numbers were provided to the audit department.
It's your adjustment.
Yes.
Okay. And you're not only saying the company needs to refund this money, you're also adding it to their income, correct?
I believe Mr. Major could better address that question.
Mr. Major, you agree with him? $26,037, circled in red here, is listed in the ORS's proposed revenue increase as part of adjustment 17 under other operating income, right?
That's right.
Okay, so if we add $27,000 or $26,037 to income, that's being used as income for margin, right?
It is a component of operating revenues. It has been credited to revenues.
So we took the refund of $78,000, we amortized it over 3 years, and added it back into revenues. Correct, Mr. Major?
No, sir. Those rates were collected at, the amount you see there was collected at 34%. The company has already collected those revenues. We credited those amounts back to revenue.
When would the company have collected this money at 34%?
The company collect through rates, the last approved rates.
Mr. Major, you audited 2018. Did the company collect $26,000 in excess revenues during the 2018 test year?
Well, to better characterize it, it's a reflection of the amounts that were collected through approval.
And I asked you, did the company during the test year collect $26,000 in excess tax revenues?
It is not reflected on their books as such.
Okay. And so what we're doing is taking a refund amount of $78,000 and actually taking money that's going, that you would have go back to the customers, and you're actually including it in their revenues.
The company provided neither in the application nor testimony, any way of complying with commission orders related.
I didn't ask you what the company did in its application. What I'm asking you is, you're taking $26,307 that you just told us the company did not collect in 2018, and you're adding it as a component of their revenue requirement. Now, if you do that, if that money doesn't exist, in fact, are you not artificially inflating their revenue requirement by $26,037?
No, sir. I'm adding it back to operating revenue.
You agree with me they never collected that money?
The money, the calculation reflects the money that has been collected in rates at that percentage at that time. This is ORS complying with the commission orders.
No. Now, I want to know when the company saved $26,000.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Trini has asked this question a number of times, and Mr. Majors is trying to explain. I'd ask that Mr. Majors just be given the chance to explain his answer fully.
Well, I want a responsive answer to my question, not a recitation of their position on 2014 revenues. So my question, to be clear, so Mr. Major can answer it, is did the company end up $26,000 better off? Did it get $26,000 in additional revenue in 2018?
This reflects the change in tax law. The company, as we discussed earlier, the company did not record this on their books, and ORS is now recording a regulatory liability as ordered by the commission.
Mr. Major, let's be straight here. Your tax liability, and you testified to this, was $25,403. That's what they paid in income taxes during 2018, was it not? Or at least that was their liability.
That is what
was it not? That reflected the 21% rates, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm asking you, $26,037, did it magically appear? They get a refund from the government?
I don't have a response to magic, sir.
Okay, did they get a refund from the federal government of $26,000?
I don't think that they did.
Okay, and if they didn't get a refund of $26,000, is there any way that this company will ever be able to achieve that operating margin of 12.51% based on the numbers that the ORS is recommending?
Based on the numbers that we have recommended, it reflects an operating margin of 12.51%.
But wouldn't they always be short of that margin if you subtracted $26,000?
Based on the $26,000 in excess revenues, plus the
If we
revenue
take
increase.
let's make it simple. If we take $26,000 out of this column, would they have a 12.51% operating margin?
Mathematically speaking, they would not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Major. Mr. Seaman Wynn. You testified that CUC has maintained its commitment to providing quality services to its customers and effectively and efficiently managed its business operations. Is that right?
Yes.
And you testified that CUC is a well-operated water and sewer utility with an established record of providing quality service to its customers, correct?
Yes.
And you testified that during the test year, CUC demonstrated sound financial practices and provided reliable service to its customers, correct?
Yes.
And you also testified that the average operating margin awarded by this commission was approximately 13.6% for the last 5 full calendar years, correct? That's on page 8, line 3 through 5.
That is in my direct testimony, yes.
And the average operating margin awarded by this commission for the past 5 full calendar years was approximately 14%. Correct?
Correct.
So even if we take the last 3 full calendar years, and we know you left out 2019, but according to your calculations, the average margin was 13.6%. We agree on that.
We can agree on that.
And we can agree that this company is well operated, that it provides quality service, and that it has sound financial practices. We just said that, right?
We would say that, and I would say that that is what is expected of this commission.
Sure. And for this company that is well operated, that has sound financial practices, that you said all this stuff about, you recommended an operating margin that is more than 1 full basis point below the average that you cited to the commission. Is that correct?
I also say some other things that you're leaving.
No, I'm asking you a question, yes or no. Is that correct? Did you recommend an operating margin for this company that is more than 1 full basis point below the average margin you cited to the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I understand that Mr. Seaman needs to answer the question, but I would ask that he be given the ability to explain his answer once he's answered it.
Once he's answered it.
Based on our analysis, we are recommending a 12.51% operating margin in this case.
Is that 1 full basis point below the average that you cited to this commission?
It is less than the 13.6%.
Is it 1% less than the 13.6%?
Approximately.
Is it more than 1% less than the 13.6% average, Mr. Seaman Wynn?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Major. Thank you, Mr. Seaman Wynn. Thank you, Ms. James.
Thank you.
No better than tangle with you.
Okay. No questions. Commissioners. Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Major, I love to beat a dead horse. And I want to go back, unfortunately, Mr. Trini took that off, but, that exhibit off, but looking, and I don't know if it's Mr. Major or Mr. Seaman Wim, and I'm gonna start with Mr. Major. On your KLM one, and we're talking about the line, other operating income, add amortization of excess revenues, and that's the 26,037.
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe you testified that, CUC admitted they did not create a regulatory liability.
Yes, ma'am.
If there had been a regulatory liability created, would that line appear on your exhibit KLM one?
Yes, it would have.
And would it be in the same posture as adding that amount back in?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the effect? I mean, it says add amortization of excess revenues. So that is increasing net margin for return? Excuse me, net income for return, for margin?
It is added back to revenue as a component of the taxes that were collected.
I understand
yes,
that.
ma'am.
I'm just trying to understand where it comes into this. I understand where the $26,000 number is coming from. I just, I thought regulatory liabilities would show on the balance sheet.
This is an attempt to show, this is providing a declaration of where it would show up on the balance sheet here on our exhibits.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have on that one. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, in your testimony, you spoke about customer growth.
Yes, Commissioner.
I believe I'm on page 9 of your revised direct, and you basically are netting out a negative water service customer growth with a little positive sewer service customer growth. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
In your testimony, you also expressed concern about the inequity of the two groups of ratepayers, the water customers, wastewater customers.
Yes, Commissioner.
Does the fact that the sewer service growth is outpacing water service customers, does that exacerbate the issue any?
It might, Commissioner, but I would direct you to Mr. Major's exhibits KLM 2 and KLM 3. These two exhibits show the operating margins for water operations on KLM 2 and sewer operations on KLM 3. Looking at the operation margin line in column 5, you can see that the water operations are receiving an operating margin of 26.52%, as opposed to the sewer operations, which have a negative 14.58%.
You're in the after proposed increase column.
During the after proposed increase, those numbers are, if you look at column 3, and it's 19.4% for water and negative 20.84 for sewer. These imbalances have led to, are the primary reason for our recommendation that the company be required to conduct a cost of service study prior to its next rate case so that expenses can be properly allocated amongst water and sewer operations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you all for your testimony today.
Thank you. Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Major, how are you this afternoon?
Doing okay, sir.
Were any of the business miles by the company allowed, that you allowed, considered to be commuting trips from Florence to the company's service territory to perform work.
Sir, if I could, would you allow Ms. James to speak to that?
Sure.
Yes, sir, that's her adjustment.
Yes, sir. Ms. James? I need to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
I'm interested in knowing, if you look at the business miles allowed for the company, were any of those business miles for commuting from the Florence headquarters to the company's service territory?
Yes.
They were?
Yes.
Why would commuting business miles be allowed for rate-making purposes, or should they be?
The company provided that information and stated that they were making those trips to conduct whatever business they had at that location. So I saw that it was reasonable to allow those mileage.
Well, Michael, from a rate-making standpoint, do you think that that should be considered in the rate base?
Yes, Commissioner, I do.
Okay. Did you consider the possibility of trying to outsource some of the administrative and bookkeeping to a more local source rather than trying to do it from a remote office?
Mr. Commissioner, we do not manage the management of the company. We reviewed the company's operations. It is not uncommon to see more than one business office for a utility. There were operations being conducted at the Florence office as well as the office on Kalawasi Island. We found those operations to all be reasonable. As such, they were part of our recommendations to the Commission in this case.
Thank you. Moving to page 10 of your revised direct testimony, you explained that you used the Commission-approved cost of service in order number 2014-1001 for excess revenue calculations. You believe that appropriately reflects the excess tax revenue that was collected under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now, Mr. Walsh's calculation of the refund using ORS's more recent test of your operating experience results in a much lower amount. Could you comment on that in terms of your calculation on Exhibit MSH4? Is that an overstatement, or?
No, sir, I don't believe that it is. The last recorded or approved rates, revenues and expenses by this Commission were in that 2013 case, that 2014 order. Absent the company actually creating the regulatory liability, there's really no other set of numbers to base the excess revenue calculations off of.
Why do you believe the 3-year amortization period is appropriate?
That's the same amortization period that we're recommending for rate case expenses.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. James, got one question for you. You had a exchange with Commissioner Irvin just a minute ago about business mileage, and you recommended that those be included. My question to you is, do the company's officers, president, secretary, treasurer, keep log books or mileage? How did ORS go about inspecting those records? Or did you have mileage log books? What did they have for you to review?
Ms. Michael, she provided the same amount of mileage that was settled upon in the last rate case. So we took that amount and multiplied it by the federal mileage rate, and we removed any other vehicle-related officer expenses, which yielded our adjustment.
Okay, so you went by what was provided previously. It wasn't a logbook where you can see date, time, origin, destination, that detail. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I guess this one is for you, Mr. Major. ORS, there's been a lot of, talk about the operating structure of the utility in terms of numbers of positions needed to manage and operate the utility. In your opinion, is the company, properly staffed?
The company, in review, through discovery, we found that the company is, for consideration for rates, they're considering the same amount of employees as was settled in the previous rate proceeding. So although the company employs 9 individuals, they are asking coverage for 8 employees, just as in the previous rate case. So we didn't find that to be unreasonable, same as before.
So you feel like that's the proper staffing level? Or ORS does? And we just heard a lot of discussion about that in the night hearings and in the testimony. So is that your opinion?
That would be a bit outside of my scope as far as, staffing levels.
Commissioner, I
Yes,
can
sir.
take that
Yes, sir,
question.
Mr. Seaman Wynn. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. We did not find that the staffing levels were extravagant or out of the realm of normal for a company.
Okay, Mr. Seaman Wynn, I'll finish up with you. The discussion I asked earlier about the cost of service study that was recommended, I asked company witness about that. And it's, I think you all were recommending it because water companies, in your words, were subsidizing sewer customers, in ORS's words. In your experience, what are the costs related to conducting such a study, and do you believe that expenditure would be beneficial to the ratepayers?
I'm not sure about the expense of conducting a cost of service study, but would it be beneficial to ratepayers? Absolutely, Mr. Commissioner. You can see that this company has water customers and sewer customers. Not all water customers are sewer customers. Not all sewer customers are water customers. A cost of service study would better allocate the costs for each of those operations to the customers that are generating those expenses and would limit the cross-subsidization between the two.
Thank you, but you don't have any guess or estimate, if you will, of what that cost study would be, the cost of that?
Not for a water company, Mr. Commissioner, no. Mr. Walsh might be able to speak better to that.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Mr. Stephen Wynn, I have to admit I'm reluctant to bring this conversation up again after the exchange you had with Mr. Torini. Given the fact, again, just for my clarification, I guess I want to know your mindset. Given the fact that you complimented the company's efficiency, given the fact that over the last 3 years, operating margin was 13.6. Last 5 years, it was 14 even. Where is your mindset on determining that 12.1 would be a good operating margin in view of the fact that, and how would that affect the company going out for growth patterns of any capital improvement? How would that, tell me your mindset on determining the 12.1.
Absolutely, Mr. Commissioner, and I'm sure you've been waiting this for a long time, but as a proud graduate of Newark Rate School.
I have been waiting for that for a long time. I thought you'd never say it.
Considering what the Commission has ordered in previous cases is only one part of what we consider within our recommendation. Considering the company's good customer service is one part of what we consider in our recommendation. The financial status of a company is also part of that. This company is well operated, has had good customer service since its last rate case. It also has had no very large capital expenditures and hasn't had any significant change in operations since its last rate case. In essence, the company is asking for its customers, to pay more for the same level of service that they have been currently receiving.
That was, still I'm having a disconnect between the 13.6 and the 14 and operating efficiency. I mean, they're being punished. I could say they're being punished for operating efficiently.
No, Commissioner, I wouldn't say that they're being punished at all. Now, a company that is operating well, this company has operated very well with a 12.51%. The reason that they've come in, as specifically spoken to by Ms. Michaels, was increases in their operating expenses. Now, those operating expenses are going to be reset in this case. They're going to receive some sort of change from this commission. Should the customers pay for more for the current service that they currently are beyond what the addition of those additional operating expenses, ORS would not make that recommendation. This company is financially sound. It doesn't have any significant financial risk. It hasn't included any significant capital projects since its last rate case. It is well operated, and ORS would expect that a 12.51% operating margin would allow the company to continue good service going forward.
Thank you, as a proud graduate of the neighborhood rate school. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is probably going to Mr. Seaman Wynn, but if Mr. Major wants to jump in, you feel sure, and Ms. James, and if you want to add something to the Tax Cut and Jobs Acts again, you're welcome to as well. And I apologize for failing to bring this up earlier. Are you familiar with Mr. Walsh's rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the exhibit attached thereto, which was a memorandum of understanding with Kiowa Island Utilities?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And I believe, and if I misstate this, please correct me and go to the testimony, but I believe Mr. Walsh indicated that that memorandum of understanding recalculated what would be due back under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in the same manner that he calculated it in his testimony. And my question is, why would ORS have one method for one utility and another method for another?
That's an excellent question, Ms. Commissioner.
You have an excellent answer.
I'll let you determine whether I do or not. Kiowa Island Utilities and ORS reached an agreement on the calculation of the excess revenues outside of a general rate case. That memorandum of understanding was developed and filed underneath the tax docket. It was handled outside and prior to their last rate case. This company was offered the same, and it is my understanding that senior management with ORS reached out to CUC, but did not hear back from them. They had the same opportunity as Kiowa Island, as did other water and sewer utilities across the state. But it's my understanding that that's the case. That being said, ORS calculated the excess revenue due to the TCJA in accordance with the Commission's order and has presented to you in this case.
When you say it's your understanding, I take it you were not directly involved with reaching out and that was somebody else and somebody telling you something. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
So you wouldn't have any knowledge of how communication was made with the utilities regarding the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and how many of them may have taken advantage of it, similar to Kiowa, and how many of them didn't respond?
That is correct, Ms. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ma'am. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Any redirect?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to touch on a couple of different issues. I'm going to do my best to clear up some of the confusion around the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act adjustments, specifically adjustments 16 and 17. Mr. Major, I inadvertently unplugged Mr. Tarini's exhibit KLM1 that was on the smart board or the board a second ago. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about some of the figures Mr. Tarini was asking you about. Specifically, adjustments 16 in your column 3 and 17 in your column 4. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but help me understand. Adjustment 16 in column 3, which is the $25,403. If you go back and look in your testimony on page 10, where you explain your adjustment 16, this figure corresponds to the 2018 tax expense using the 21% tax amount. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And in adjustment 17, the $26,037 corresponds to the amount that CUC should refund its customers because it did not put a refund in its application. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this 26,000 and the 25,000, these are really two separate issues. Is that correct?
Yes, they are.
So let me ask you just a few basic questions. Did you follow GAAP procedures when you did your accounting for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act refund?
Yes, we did.
Did you follow commission orders when you did your accounting to do the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act refund?
Yes, we did.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, I have a couple of questions for you. Well, let me finish with this, and this is probably a really simple example. Mr. Major, this is back to you. I'm sorry for jumping around. But when you included the refund and you also included the correct amount which corresponds to the 21% tax rate, did you essentially double count the taxes owed back to CUC's customers by CUC?
No, we did not.
Okay, Mr. Seaman-Wynn, I think that I've got a few questions for you now. There's been some discussion of the ORS when it came up with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act refund due to customers using the previously approved rates in the 2014 order. You're aware of that discussion, I'm sure.
Yes.
Why did ORS use these rates in this case? when calculating the refund to CUC's customers?
Again, these were the numbers from the most recently established commission order. Had the company begun their regulatory liability on January 1st of 2018, they would have used the same numbers.
And absent a settlement agreement, why did ORS not use the rates that Mr. Major audited in this case? Well, let me rephrase. It was a poorly worded question, and I apologize for that. Let me rephrase the question. Absent a settlement agreement, why would it have been improper for ORS to use the rates that Mr. Major audited in this case?
Absent a settlement agreement, it would have been inappropriate to use anything other than what had been previously awarded by the commission.
That's right. Mr. Major's rates, the ones that he's proposed, have not been approved by the commission. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Let's see. Mr. Seaman, are the rates previously approved by the commission in the 2014 docket, are those stale at this point in time?
Are the rates stale?
Sure. Much discussion has been made about the time period that's elapsed between 2014 and now. The implication being that the rates under which you calculated your refund must be stale. Are those rates stale?
No, I would say that they are not. They are the most recently approved commission rates, and the last rate case for this company has not been that long ago.
Has there been a considerable, or what is the rate of customer growth that's occurred between the 2014 rate case and the rates, the test year, and the test year submitted by CUC in this case?
I'm afraid I don't have customer numbers from the last rate case with me.
Mr. Seaman, there's also been much discussion about the operating margin and the various averages, or the averages in the state of what some have characterized as similarly situated utilities. Is reviewing averages by this commission, is that a dispositive component when calculating an operating margin?
No, as I said before, there are numerous factors that ORS takes into consideration when recommending an operating margin to this commission. Some of those being, as we have said before, the quality of service that the company is providing, the financial condition of the company. We also do take a look at what has been previously awarded by the commission, but it is not the only factor we take into consideration.
And in fact, Mr. Seaman, if averages were dispositive, what would be the end result?
If that were the only factor that ORS were to take into consideration is what the average of what the commission has awarded within a certain number of cases, and then over a period of time, eventually every company would be making the exact same operating margin. It would just factor down to an average.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. No further questions.
Thank you. Any recross on those questions? Hang on, before we get to recross, we need to take a short break. We'll take about 10 minutes. Okay, we'll call us back into session. Mr. Terraney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Ms. James. Just kidding. Mr. Seaman, when the CUC doesn't have many sewer customers, does it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
CUC does not have many sewer-only customers, does it?
I don't have the exact number, but I don't believe that there are that many.
Probably less than 50. I think it's in the application.
I'd have to check, but
Sound about right?
possibly so.
I mean, my point is to the extent that sewer-only customers are being subsidized, there aren't that many sewer-only customers in this company.
The fact is that overall, sewer customers are being subsidized by water.
I'm not arguing.
There may not be that many sewer
Right.
only customers, but the fact is all sewer customers are being subsidized by water.
I promise, I'm not arguing with you about that. The cost of service is what it is. My point is, most of these people are water and sewer customers.
The majority of them are, yes.
So that's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's all I'm saying.
For those customers,
For the vast majority of the customers, they're paying the water rate, they're paying the sewer rate. That's all I'm saying, right?
yes.
Okay. The 12.51% operating margin, it was a result of a settlement, wasn't it?
I would say yes. Commissioner Belser handed me an exhibit that says settlement agreement, so I would say yes, it is.
Okay. And the 2018 rates, income tax liability is calculated, as we discussed with Mr. Major, on the basis of operating revenues and operating expenses, not rates, right? I mean, the rates
Operating
produce a
expenses
revenue.
and operating expenses and operating revenues, yes.
Yeah, and in 2018, while we had 2014 rates, we had a different operating experience or a different net taxable income than we would have in 14.
The company would have still been collecting revenues to pay their the federal rate of 35%, 35% in those rates, in those revenues.
We can disagree on that, but my point is whether those rates were approved in 2014 or approved in 2016, this business of stale rates really doesn't have anything to do with the net income tax liability. It's really all about the net taxable income. That's how you calculate it.
I can agree with that.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask. Mr. Chairman, mentioned the ORS's dealings with the company. That's not something that was in pre-file testimony. I would like to call Ms. Michael in reply to that testimony so she can testify to her experience with ORS dealing on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act issue, or lack thereof.
Okay, we'll be able to do that. We will do that when we get this panel.
Yes, sir.
Are you done with that?
Mr. Chairman, if nothing else, we'd like to just reserve our objection to that. Mr. Seaman was responding to a question. It was germane to the response, and we'd object to Ms. Michael's introduction of testimony, which wasn't pre-filed and in this manner, which doesn't comply with Commission rules, regulations.
Why don't we take that up, as you suggested, Mr. Chairman, when this panel's now?
Okay, I think we're have finished with everything for this panel. We appreciate y'all's testimony, and you may step down. Thank you.
May I ask for my order back?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Chairman, just to confirm, so the objection was overruled and Ms. Michael's coming up, is that correct?
Yes. Go ahead.
She's coming. Ms. Michael, with regard to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, were you ever offered the opportunity to settle your liability for refunds according to the same terms as were offered to Kiowa Island Utilities?
No, sir, except when we went into the review session with the ORS for them to review our application, I specifically told them that I had not done anything on it because I did not know how to do it, that I wanted to do the right thing, I wanted to be fair, and I asked if we could handle that outside of rate case as a separate matter so that it wouldn't tangle up our rate case and affect our new rates going forward. And I think his name was Matthew Schlesinger?
Schellinger, maybe?
Schellinger looked straight at me across the table and said, yes, we can help you with that, and we can do that. Prior to that, I had called and talked to various people before we even did a rate case or had made a decision to do it, I think. I called and talked to various people at the Office of Regulatory Staff asking. I didn't know what to do, and I think I was told at some point, well, most companies are just coming in to do rate case, because even if you put this liability account on your books and carry it forward, it never ends until you get your rates adjusted for the corrected tax rate, which made perfect sense to me. So even if I had put the account on the books and we had agreed on a dollar amount moving forward, it would have never gone away, that dollar amount, until such time as I got my rates adjusted, which is why finally, after much deliberation, we decided to come in for a rate case to get this cleared up once and for all. So I'm sorry, but you know, I try to be an honest person, and I don't mind people defending their positions and their numbers and their calculations and why they did what they did. But when something is said that I feel is wrong and not correct, then I feel that that does not provide fairness to these proceedings. I understand we're on different sides of the table and we want different things. I just want to be treated fairly for what has happened. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Mike.
Wait a minute,
You may
hang
need
on.
to answer some
Stay
questions.
right here. Any cross?
And thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're allowed, the parties are allowed cross-examinations.
Yes, sir.
Since Michael came back, so. You can.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what happened. When you were talking to the ORS about when you came in, okay, let's ask it this way. You came in to meet with the ORS to talk with them before you filed your application?
It was recommended that we meet with the ORS to review.
Okay.
And they would make recommendations or advise us on things that we needed to do that we hadn't done maybe, or those kind of things, which I think is a really nice service that they offer.
Sure.
And we certainly wanted to take advantage of that, and I did, and my dad and I were both there, as were Mr. Walsh and Mr. Torini. We were all there.
Okay, and you specifically asked the question of somebody at ORS, and I'm characterizing what you said.
Yes, sir.
Can we do this outside the rate case?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I acknowledged that that we had an issue that had to be addressed and made correct. We wanted help with it, of what to do. And I just asked if it could be handled outside of rate case, like can we calculate the refund and can we can we do this for our customers and not have it mixed in with the rate case?
And it's your testimony that someone in the ORS said, yes, you can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then what happened?
Then they put it in they put it in the adjustments and added it back in as revenue to me, which hurts me in the rate case to add it back in as revenue. They've put the calculation that they just sat here and talked extensively about, they added it back into revenues.
Well, and that took place much later.
Well, we were about to file when we went in for the review. We were about to file, so it went in. I guess when they started doing their adjustments and everything, whenever that was during the process.
Okay, but let me be clear. They said you could do it outside the context of this rate case, this docket. Did anything else happen outside the context of this rate case and this docket with respect to handling the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Not during the process of discovery.
Well, let me be more clear, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's set aside what took place before you filed the application and then what took place after you filed it. You said that you had a conversation that said this can be done outside the context of your rate case. Did you have any additional conversations or communications from the ORS before the rate case was filed about, as you say, doing it outside the context of the rate case?
No, sir, but we filed pretty quickly after that because we had everything ready and we, just reviewed the things they'd said to us and such, and we might have tweaked it here and there, but it was pretty much ready to file. And my understanding was just that when they came back with their adjustments in rate case and everything, that they would also be providing me with a recommendation of how I could settle the tax cut issue, that it would not be included in the rate case adjustments per se, but it would be a requirement for me to do. If I'm making sense, it would be a requirement for me to do, but it would not be a part of the rate case. That was my understanding. Evidently, I was incorrect, but that was my understanding. And I'm pretty sure it was my attorneys and my consultants' understanding as well. They were there as well, because we discussed it.
I'm going to sit down after I ask one more question, but
I might not be saying it exactly right, but
when somebody said you can do it outside the context of the rate case, did any?
No, sir, he said he would help me do it. He said he would help me with the calculations to do it.
Okay.
And I asked him specifically, I said, it's above my pay grade, honestly, to do these kind of calculations that you do, and I don't know how you do it. Because I came up with something far less when I tried to calculate it than what they calculated it at. So clearly, I didn't have the formula. And I just simply asked, could you help us with figuring out what we need to do to rebate the customers? We're not opposed to rebating the customers what we fairly owe them. We're not. I'm not opposed to that. I just want it to be fair. And I don't like this commission being told that I was offered the chance to sit down and do an MOU when I wasn't, except at that moment. And then nothing else was ever said to me, and lo and behold, it was added into my revenue on the adjustments for the rate case, which is not how we expected it to be handled at all. And then using expenses from 5 years ago to calculate it.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Bateman.
Ms. Michael, this will be very brief.
Thank you.
I do want to state at the outset that I'm positive it was not Mr. Seaman-Wynn's intention to impugn your character. ORS
Thank you.
has had no thoughts of such, and we wouldn't.
I thought we worked very well together. I tried to be open, an open book, anything you wanted. I produced it. I dug things out that were multiple years old, found receipts. I had, I think, good records, and I've tried to be an open book with the ORS.
Yes, ma'am, and we certainly appreciate it, but I wanted to state that at the outset.
Thank you.
Second, it sounds like, and I wasn't present at this either, but it sounds like there was maybe the attempt or initial stages of a sort of we can help you or a negotiation, and then nothing was ever executed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm looking at the date, the execution date of Mr. Walsh's exhibit. This is the Memorandum of Understanding from the Kiowa case, Mr. Walsh's Exhibit 2. And the Elmo is not up, but it is in the record. So would it surprise you to learn that the execution date of this MOU was September 14th, 2018. It looks like Mr. Nelson of ORS signed it on that date, and someone for Kiowa Island signed it on September 13th, 2018. Would that surprise you?
I'm not sure which MOU you're referring. You're referring to Kiowa's MOU?
Yes, ma'am. This is the MOU that Mr. Walsh references that deals with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act adjustment outside of a rate case. And my only point is that it was executed in mid-September of 2018. Would it surprise you to learn that?
I'm not sure what you're getting at. I don't know that I knew the date that it was executed, no, but I'm not sure what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Michael.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Michael, thank you for anything else we need to ask Ms. Michael. You may step down.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that needs to come before us before we wrap this up?
Proposed orders?
Getting to that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Dong for a
Okay, so just for the record, and during a prior break, I discussed with all the parties, council, dates for proposed orders, and we also discussed Section 58.5.240D, which would extend the time for the final order to be issued. And I won't go into a lot of detail here, but all the parties have agreed that the date for the final order, which would have been Thursday, January 23rd, would be extended to Thursday, January 30th of 2020. And if we would ask the parties to produce their proposed orders 2 weeks in advance of that, that would make the date for proposed orders Thursday, January 16th, 2020. And I will issue a hearing officer order that will comport with the requirements of Section 58.5.240D and lay out the justification for the 5 days. Anything further?
Okay, everybody in agreement with that? Okay. Thank you. All right. There's nothing else. We appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for your testimony, and we are adjourned.